Okay, in just one more minute, we'll get things rolling. Actually, what I can do now is let me start going through some of the house cleaning items that we've got just from a chapter level before we hand the microphone over to our presenters. The first thing I wanted to mention is that for anybody that still needs to renew their membership with ISACA, the window stays open through January 31st. And just want to encourage everybody to renew. And if you have any questions on it or want to chat with the chapter about it, please reach out to us. Let us know how we can help and help add the best value to everything. The best way to reach us, I'm going to put some of this information in the chat. This is our email address, so you can reach us there. We will be recording the webinar here, which will allow us to be able to repurpose it and share it on the chapter's YouTube page and as well as on the website. So for anybody that can't make it and wants to catch it or refer back to anything, that will be available. Let me grab this as well. And if you do visit the chapter website, I'm going to drop this link in there now. We do have February's presentation lined up and ready for registrations. So there's the link to it there. And we will, for February's, we're going to have Tony Anscombe from ESET presenting on the log4j vulnerability, but not so much on a technical side as much as from a business perspective, what to look out for, and probably how this is going to hang around with us for quite some time in the future. So he'll be giving us his insights on that. Raul, regarding CPEs, we're updating the process where anybody that is registered for this will be emailing out a certificate of attendance for this that you can keep for your records. And then, but you do need to go into the ISACA corporate portal and register it yourself. There's some issues with our ability with the platform and our ability to upload them on your behalf, but we'll be sending those out, and then you'll have that. So if anybody doesn't get it afterwards, just let us know. So with that, we've got a lot of attendees. This is awesome. Our presenters today are Bo and Dawn with Global Relay, which is an international service company specializing in compliance. I'll let them get into more detail on stuff like that. But they are out of Canada. And we were able to meet and connect up through our day jobs. And when I was able to learn more about what they did and how unique it is, I thought this would be very exciting. So we're real excited to have them. Everything they're going to be sharing will be of an educational nature. But if you do have any questions about them, their business, or anything like that, please reach out. Let us know. We'll be happy to put you in contact with them, and they can give you a walk through the platform and things like that. So I would like to, at that point, I was going to put you guys on the spot, and you can either introduce yourselves or each other, whichever you prefer.
That's fun.
Interesting.
You should start doing that, Don.
Yeah, think about that one.
Sure. Well, I'll lead off and make a game time decision when it gets to it. But I first want to say, Dave, thank you so much, and Rich, and to the ISACA San Diego chapter. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Bo Nelson. Technical account manager at Global Relay. So I work closely with my colleague Don, our business development, sales, marketing, and product teams in terms of understanding, what our customers and customers kind of in the industries that we serve require, need, in order to make a better solution. My background is in electronic discovery. So it's funny, Don and I have somewhat similar backgrounds in that we were both in IT, doing network administration. And then ultimately I came over to the law firm e-discovery side, and Don went compliance. And here we are back together again. So with that, Don, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks everyone again. My title is VP of Compliance Supervision at Global Relay. Like Bo, I'm a recovering tech guy who kind of shifted to sales. I approached the compliance from this perspective of message supervision and email supervision for the financial space. And that's where Global Relay kind of grew up. So they were a competitor of mine for years before I kind of joined the team. My focus, while it remains on that side, I've always been trying to catch up to the records management side of things. And Bo, that was great when he joined, that we kind of complemented each other from two kind of different points to the same task, which is gathering all this information and making it available. So it's good to have complementing skill sets that way. So with that, Bo, why don't you kick us off and we'll dive in here.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. And I'll hand it back over to you. I did want to let everybody know, or no, I guess I already did mention that we're recording. So never mind.
That's fine. It's not bad to remind anyway.
Yeah, I'll mute myself.
No worries. Don and I will go through just a brief kind of overview of Global Relay and what we do in terms of being able to capture data, message data, being able to help our customers preserve it, govern it, protect it, and ultimately kind of respond, based on those different requirements that we'll start to look at. We'll go through kind of what we're seeing in terms of the regulatory legal requirements, but also kind of the pains from our point of view. We'll talk about the connectors, which will kind of become more apparent as I describe what we actually do as a company. But being able to kind of connect that data into our archive and do that with a certain amount of integrity is key. And then kind of, what customers, what the industry is kind of doing with that data once it's there in terms of managing it, retention, and the rest. So we're a Global Relay archive. We've been a SaaS company since 1999. So for well over 20 years now, we've been working in primarily the regulated financial industry, and have since then started to branch out, but it's where we got our start. Again, 20 years. We are still very much ingrained in the banking and finance industry, but really we solve a multitude of problems across regulated and non-regulated entities. So we're global. And we put a lot of effort into support. It's really the only reason I wanted to include this visual. You can kind of see who the customers are at the top, and we'll be speaking to some of them. However, we started in Vancouver, so we're a Canadian company, and I think I pronounced Vancouver correctly. All the way through London and offices in between in North America. Now on to the fun part in terms of what I think is interesting, right? The people that we serve have a need to be able to capture or a requirement from either a regulator or from a legal perspective. So we'll kind of speak to legal use cases in compliance with information governance and privacy kind of sprinkled throughout. But I like to start with this because I think it's kind of a good visual from kind of where we come into the picture. And a lot of times that's just someone saying, hey, we've deployed Slack, or especially with the pandemic, right? Everyone now is on Teams, on Zoom, in addition to Slack, and then text messaging. So there are many, many ways to capture that data, and a little bit later we'll kind of speak to those different methods. But just so you have a visual of kind of the way that we handle all of those different message and data types, including all of the emerging data types, and bringing those securely into our archive.
It's a big focus for our development teams to just keep up to speed with not only what's coming out all the time, but what's changing all the time. So none of those, they're all moving targets. They all change what they do. And the last thing they think of is compliance or the records retention side of things. So sometimes the last person to know is the person that's responsible for capturing this stuff. So we're constantly making sure we keep all these things up to date.
Yeah, with a certain level of integrity behind that.
Exactly.
And just a kind of a view of the life cycle of the messages kind of once they're in the archive. Don, do you want to kind of go through a couple of these
yeah, this is
parts?
where I can channel my old CISSP days with this one, because it covers the integrity with which we do this is important, because we serve financial companies primarily. They're held to a higher standard. So you can't just have a simple archive that's collecting some data from various sources and hope that you've got it right. You've got to track this stuff from beginning to end through the whole life cycle. So what we tried to capture here is the kind of breadth of that effort, from the minute we pull that data in and it comes in through a secure transition. So we make sure everything's encrypted between us and the customer. And then everything from that point is fully reconciled, so that every step in the process, we don't just take a message and write it to a disk somewhere. It's got to be indexed. It's got to be archived properly. It's got to be accounted for and reconciled at each step in the process. And it ultimately gets written out 4 times across 2 different data centers. So there's 4 copies of this. Each of those copies has to be properly reconciled. So we don't consider it successfully archived until it's gone all the way through the process and gotten written to disks and confirmed every step of the way. So it's a pretty big deal. And buried in the middle there, that constant integrity check, that's something we do proactively that separates us and kind of changes the game. The traditional archive space, you might think you were getting everything accurately stored, but you'd find out you missed something, or you didn't have what you thought, or there was an error right at the point where you'd go searching for data. And that's the worst time to find out that you've got a problem with your data store. So proactive checks on all of this are important. So it gives you an idea when you're thinking of a truly compliant store for this kind of information. There's a lot that goes into that word compliant behind the scenes.
And I'm sure there are several in this audience who probably thoroughly understand that process.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. And just the last piece about kind of what else happens to that data, and really how Global Relay is enabling the business, starting to enable more of the business users, and taking a bit of that burden off of what were traditionally IT roles. But from a privacy standpoint, from a regulatory and sometimes legal standpoint, having the capabilities to be able to not only secure and manage, but offer highly granular access control based on either groups, or other individual requirements is key to our solution. So it's backed on security statement. I mean, it's paramount. So from being able to physically separate to logically separate the data, the access, and kind of the tools that are offered for you to be able to get your job done, whether it's doing your supervision review to prove to FINRA that you've done your due diligence, or the next investigation that pipes up. Some of the capabilities around classifying messages, which we'll get to a little bit later too, are really important to be able to, especially scale to our very largest customer. We run the spectrum. From the largest banks, down to a 2-person shop. And with that, why don't we actually get into some of the fun stuff?
Yeah.
Hey, guys, just real quick, we do have a question. Someone's asking if the slide deck can be made available afterwards, if you guys are okay with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have no problem sharing that.
Okay,
100%.
awesome. Then what we'll do is we can share that and the recording up on the website.
Right.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. We'll send that over after we're done.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
So from here, we'll take a little bit of a step back or up as to the motivation behind this. And again, our primary focus over the years has been responding to the financial authorities. So you can see on this slide the North American authorities, the SEC, FINRA, some of the foreign agencies that we respond to. A lot of the rules and regulations that come out of these groups kind of overlap with one another. They work in concert, intentionally or unintentionally. They very much rely on one another for kind of consistent rules. Some are a subset of the other. I think the FCA kind of followed the lead of the SEC for a long time with the way they had rules in the UK. They've since kind of leapfrogged the SEC a little bit and kind of took a few steps forward and added more controls around voice and around other messaging types that SEC and FINRA rules didn't really cover explicitly anyway. They kind of had interpretations that would include some of these requirements, but in the end, all of these agencies kind of set the standards, and they're continually raising those standards. So every time a new messaging platform comes out, it's a matter of time before they address with either a new ruling or a new regulation about how they're going to expand to include those new platforms, those new controls. Of course, when you don't meet these, we on the next slide has some deals where, what does it look like when you fall short of what some of these requirements are? And the highlight, just recently came out this massive fine to we'll call it a global bank around WhatsApp. Another one of those message types. We get asked about it all the time. Firms are very much aware that they need to be looking at this, but this is the kind of the first really big shot across from the agencies to really hit somebody hard on this, and that's even with cooperation from the firms themselves. A lot of times these fines come down and it's the firm figures out that there's a problem and they work with the authorities, and yet the fine still can be somewhat considerable.
Yeah, and this one, they actually censured one of the divisions as well, right? And
yeah,
I think the SEC even forced them to bring in a compliance consultant to ensure that they obey the cease and desist. So
yeah. The reputational risk alone, even when stuff like this happens, and it's not always regulatory fines, we have some other examples, but even if it's not regulatory, sometimes it's just a data breach, sometimes it's just a news article or something that gets exposed through the news, that just the damage alone, regardless of the fines to a lot of these firms are nothing. They can sometimes they factor those fines in the cost of doing business. They don't even see it as a big problem. But the reputational hit that they take alongside that can be, tenfold of what the actual fine amount is.
Yeah, or like in that one example, I put this in as sanctioning defendants for using Signal. This was an interesting FTC case too. It was FTC Nolan. But it kind of, that one specifically speaks to not only the, what we're seeing in terms of new messaging apps, new means of communication, but there's also, the intentional deceit versus kind of the company approved and vetted, method of retaining, using, and deleting data. And this specific one, the judge actually issued an adverse inference against the defendants, but they were using WhatsApp and iMessage. And then once this investigation began, they switched over to Signal, which, is one of the options for being able to set up ephemeral disappearing messages. And we're seeing that. I'm sure some of you are dealing with that as well, in terms of getting into, what's official and what's not. And kind of lends itself to the personal, versus the private. And we're seeing that with text messaging especially. And I think I have some notes on that here in a bit. I like stats, so I had to include our obligatory stats. And if you don't like stats, just hold tight for a few slides. But this is a great graphic of many that was included in a recent survey done by the Association of Corporate Counsel and Page Freezer. It's the e-discovery and litigation readiness report for online data. And I think this was as of October. It's pretty recent. You don't have to squinch at all of the percentages, but what I find interesting here, this is from a retention point of view. So we're going to kind of look at, in these next few slides, like the preservation requirements and kind of the pains around retaining and being able to actually capture the stuff versus using it. So when it comes time for an audit or some type of litigation, couple of trends that stick out through these next few graphics are text messaging and social media. Probably not surprising to a lot of you. We are certainly, especially in the past couple of years, really seeing an uptick in the usage of those applications, among others, with folks working from home. So what was an issue before just got exacerbated in the past couple of years. But it's kind of what we're seeing as well in terms of the difficulty and kind of the diversity in which people are grappling with securing text messaging. When we come to look at the means to preserve by company size, so this is one where they ask them the question, what's your ranking on having no means to preserve data, right? So by company size, I find it interesting that as you kind of start to get to the bottom, especially on the very bottom, you'll see it pops up again. It's text and instant messaging. So regardless of company size, we're seeing a trend right across the landscape in terms of that specific data type. So then when we talk about actually responding to that data, again, it's perhaps even more exacerbated as we start to get down into social media and texting again. But this is in terms of, how nimbly are they able to actually respond? And I know from my world, with case law and kind of e-discovery, Slack, I think a few years ago, is these instant messaging platforms were starting to emerge, was giving several folks a lot of headaches. And if you look at some of that case law dealing with Slack data, there are varying opinions. But it's one of the popular apps where folks are coming to us to kind of deal with, not just being able to capture and preserve it, but really it's targeting specific information that you need and being able to delete the stuff that you don't care about. And similarly with text messaging, that's going to be a pain. And while texting is kind of that unified pain point across those different business sizes, look at how these methods differ when you talk about these different company sizes. And I hope you can kind of read the small print key on the bottom. But those smaller companies tend to build their own tools or go straight over to a third party, where you have the mediums kind of stretching out further to the left. Don, anything you see?
Yeah, I think the overall point of the message behind the stats that we have kind of come together around the newest and most ephemeral of the data types become the challenges across firms. And it doesn't matter, small, medium, or large companies, they all face the same battles. How they address it might come out a little differently, but you start to see the trends along the bigger picture. Everybody's had email covered for a long time, and some of the basics and traditional types of collaboration tools That's not keeping too many people up at night. But when you get out to the kind of just on the scene type approaches, these telegrams and signals and text messaging, that's where the pain is. That's where the challenges are, and the industry is scrambling across the board to deal with those.
Yep. So, speaking of, how do we actually capture that stuff, and why does it matter? Who does it matter to? So, back in the heyday, as we were starting out, BlackBerry was the golden child. I miss my BlackBerry. Loved that keyboard.
Good old days.
Yeah, yeah. So, hello WhatsApp, and hello to whatever else either exists now or is being developed without compliance and privacy perhaps in mind, that's going to need to be retained at some point. So as of October 2021, last stat I promise, but WhatsApp still reigns dominant over other mobile messaging applications. It's absolutely what we're seeing. Working on a new converter now for WhatsApp. Within Global Relay, because there are different ways when we kind of talk about the methods of acquiring data. Whether those are tried and true methods, or for some of these emerging data types, how do you ensure that, and I will say it again, the integrity is there, for our clients. So the GC, right, responding to some type of subpoena 5 years from now, ensuring that data is not only there, but that every last facet of what was supposed to be captured and converted and is available to the other side is actually there and usable. We will get a request, and then it will start to trend on, let's say, a WhatsApp, let's say a Reddit, and at that point, there are different options that Global Relay has in terms of being able to get that data right into the archive so that customer, is now compliant. There are many ways to do it, and some are scraping. So
some shadier than others.
Yeah, and it's very important for at least our customers, but within the industry, to know that the methods of capture were legitimate, and that they will be defensible, from a legal point of view, and certainly from a compliance point of view. So we have teams within Global Relay, because it is very, very important to us, and we dedicate a ton of resources to development pods who are ready to have that conversation with Slack, with Microsoft, pulling from approved APIs that were intended to operate and transfer that data with the intended purpose. So everyone's aware. There's everything from a partnership to documentation, all the way down to, and this happens quite often too. So Don kind of talked about, right, all of the changing regulations and requirements, sometimes competing requirements, right? So there's a lot of dynamic action happening on that piece that we need to be aware of. But also the changing APIs, the new features that come out in the latest chat platform, and so you can bet that as soon as that feature gets released, we get a call the very next day asking if it's eligible to be captured. So again, back to the integrity, we have teams that are ready to adapt to LinkedIn saying, hey, you have 2 months to be able to update on your end when we change our API to the new version. So it's a seamless transition. And so I think, again, while there are a lot of other shops out there who have the ability to capture, let's say everything under the sun, is it being done the right way? Because certainly from my experience in litigation e-discovery, it's the federal rules of civil procedure are a fundamental process, and so you need to have that documented. You need to have that process vetted, and then comes the reconciliation piece on the other side. And I think Don spoke to that, and the ability to kind of have that audit trail, all the way down to when that message gets disposed of. So, Don, anything to add to that?
No, that's well covered. Yeah, that just being aware of the methods of capture. There's vendors that can do this. A lot of these new message types come out so quickly, it's impossible to have a truly kind of quote unquote approved method of capturing. So sometimes you got to cut a corner and get something captured so you can capture it. But being aware of how that's going to work, knowing the limitations, knowing what you can and can't get away with, and knowing that at some point the plug might be pulled. The vendor, the owner of that chat platform might just decide one day that they don't like that people are doing what they're doing with the data capture, and they'll prevent it or block it. So that awareness is important. Knowing what you're really doing.
Hey, on that note, guys, we do have a question that came in of what does the data look like in the archive when it's captured from some of the non-traditional messaging services?
That's another key point. A lot of times the method of capture will scrape the kind of the face of the data and get it reproduced in some email structure and stuffed into an archive. And that again can be good enough in a pinch to just get something done. But to truly capture this properly, when we write a connector at Global Relay, we're really striving to capture all of that original content. So regardless of what the data type is, if it's a LinkedIn post, if it's a WeChat or WhatsApp post, it's going to look and feel like it does in the original. So when you see it, when you search for it and look at it in the archive, that LinkedIn profile update is going to look like a LinkedIn profile, and you're going to be able to see the changes as opposed to just taking text, scraping it off a page and stuffing it in. So that's another thing to be aware of. When you produce this data at the end of the day, it might be 3 years down the road. You're going to need to know what that data looked like in its original form. And if you're not preserving that properly, that's going to be a problem.
Which brings us to what's next. So those are the very conversations we have to have going into, that next customer who asks us, what about Reddit? Right. So the Wall Street bets, the debacle or shabacle, as my daughter likes to say, has put some increased scrutiny on that. And so, that is one very, prime example of Global Relay, setting up our teams to be able to capture that, or whatever else lands. And then the other side of that too is, how long will these be popular? Don, I think you mentioned that before as well. So in determining, the requirements and the need to, build out the next connector for the next, app, what's the intended longevity? Reddit, I think is going to be here to stay. It was interesting. I found it. So Reddit is the number 7 most visited website in the US. I think it's like 19th in the entire world.
Wow.
Yeah. And I learned a term recently too. And don't get mad at me. It's the term finfluencer.
Oh no.
Yeah, that would be the person who uses the old TikTok to give financial advice. They're everywhere too. Go Google it. And it's one thing to be able to capture this data and be able to retain it properly. All of the stuff that meets the requirement. But to do that at scale is a completely different ballgame. It's one that, again, we invested in heavily and kind of early on. So building that solid foundation, to be able to collect it, because again, you may have someone out there who can collect the droves of the newest message type. But if it can't be done at scale for these larger organizations that absolutely have to have that, then it's not going to be very helpful. And you have to think about that entire process too, not just getting the thing in the store, right? It is all of these other processes that happen along the way, the integrity of that message as it sits along the way, and then all of the other stuff that happens to it in terms of being able to classify that information and do so in a kind of a smart way. So there's a lot going on our back end. This is just one kind of example from one cell. So in terms of classification, and Don, I'll let you take this, but it's just kind of setting it up. So the requirements around information governance, that's ultimately what this comes down to, are kind of the core principles aside from privacy, right? Being able to not just secure, but retain and delete data that you don't need in an automated fashion to the extent that it is defensible and logical. It's something that we've been building out for a while now. And there's several ways to do it, right?
Absolutely. I think it gets overlooked quite a bit. The focus tends to be on what was said, where it was said, and who was listening. How did it get out to the public? What's the content that's being shared across whatever platform? What's often overlooked is who's saying it, who's involved in the communication. The role of the people communicating can be more important than the content. Sometimes, the same thing being said by a low-level employee in the middle of a company can be damaging. When said by the CEO can be, absolutely devastating. Context matters. So what we shared here was what goes into kind of capturing that information, whether it's an on-premise identity store or some of the newer cloud-based identity tools that are out there. The idea is you not only have to capture the content and what's being said and across all of these platforms, but you then have to map that back to who is this person? Who's just said that? Did it come from a group that's approved to talk to the public? Did it come from a group that's prohibited from saying these kind of things? Even internally in some companies, certain groups can't talk to certain other groups with ethical walls that exist between some of these vast global conglomerates. So the idea of managing the population can be just as important, and understanding who the people are, who the players are speaking. That's a significant piece. That drives actually into the different roles that have to access this data and the different things they might have to do with it. So in our philosophy, the idea, if you're capturing all of this data, of course, you're satisfying your basic legal requirements, but you're also building a tremendous intelligence source for the organization. That set of data is valuable to a lot of different groups for a lot of different reasons. So you then want to turn around and make that available to the right people, of course, under the right controls. So what we do is manage different workspaces so that each team can have access. They might share the same data, they might be looking at the same messages, but they have very different things they need to do. Compliance teams are all about running policies and supervising communications. Legal teams are all about doing their e-discovery searches and preparing legal holds to make sure they're preserving data properly. Surveillance teams, they're just poking around and running analytics to kind of understand patterns and message flow. So all of these groups have a different stake. They have very different needs for what they want to do. The idea is it's a rich source of data. Once you've gotten the tools in place to collect all of this information, it's the most valuable intelligence any firm has, is every bit of communication that goes on within and without. So having the tools to work with that data is important.
Yep. In one piece, Don, I think I would mention too, is kind of in that journey, right? So the different types of classification that enable this type of workflow. So being able to leverage that to grant access control, or when you're kind of responding and analyzing that data, right? Leveraging things like AI, which AI is another means of being able to kind of classify and utilize the data. And look, I even feel self-conscious saying AI in a presentation. So what was that joke somebody had told me recently? It was like the difference between AI and machine learning. And it's like, machine learning's in the system and AI is on a PowerPoint.
Not far off in a lot of cases.
Yeah. But from our view, we are in exciting times in terms of all of these different methods that different platforms are using to kind of reduce burden and be able to allow those users to find what they need. And AI is one way that we do it. Don, you kind of want to speak to that?
I think there's some tools we can share around the way AI is presented in the industry right now. There's a lot of companies out there with their AI slideware and their demos that can make AI look like the holy grail. It's going to solve all your compliance needs and show you everything going on in the organization. There's some key things that challenge this view that we push back when we talk to customers and they ask about AI. And the kinds of things you need to understand with an AI vendor, how many organizations or customers of theirs are actually getting value out of running their AI tools in a production environment? And that's a very loaded question, because again, doing this at scale, doing this on data that's up to the minute in real time to be able to derive valuable information. A lot of firms can take a chunk of data, throw it off in a data lake somewhere, run some really cool jobs against it, and 3 weeks later have a working copy with some great graphs and some information. But then you have to do it again with the data from this week, and in 3 weeks you'll have some answers about that. So in practical use, it rarely lives up to the hype. So finding companies that are doing this with real data in real time, in a system where the data lives, you don't have to manage it independently. Those are the kind of things that not everybody can do. So you want to make sure you go in with eyes open when you're evaluating an AI tool or someone that's selling you AI capabilities.
Yep, and ensure that's defensible as well, right? So
being able to trace, what is this black box doing? You push a button and it gives you some results. You then have to defend to a regulator or to a court to explain why you got that data result. Why am I producing this data and not that data over there? What did my AI just do?
Yep.
I think here we'll do a little bit of future wear and get on our one kind of vision for the future. And this is something that's the one kind of forward-looking piece we have at Global Relay we wanted to share, because it is pretty exciting. The holy grail of this is behavioral analytics, understanding the motivation, understanding the unwritten activity that's going on. It's one thing to read in black and white the evidence of what's happening and seeing it on paper, but a lot of times this stuff is happening over a phone call. It's reading between the lines, and humans are able to tease information out of data that systems don't do so well. What we're striving for is the ability to have voice data that's captured in a system live in real time, that's transcribed to English, that can be run through a policy, that when a reviewer goes in to look at that data and see a phone call, they can see an English transcription that's accurate to 95+%, that can show them a diarized version of exactly who said what, exactly what they said, and then even graphically present where there might be flags, where there might be issues. The case we show here, that somebody wiring money to Panama, sending cash abroad. If you're looking at that in a voice sonogram like that, you might want to understand exactly where did they violate policy, so I can go listen to that myself and hear, when they're talking about Panama and moving money, were they angry, were they happy, were they shouting at one another? All these kind of things that are present in voice that a simple text or email isn't going to be able to match. So the future is putting together these pieces, and we're in a position right now where we've got kind of the individual elements going in, and this is what the vision for our future is, to have this kind of full analytical tool in place that we can use.
Yeah, that works at scale, right?
That works at scale and is defensible. Yeah. You can't forget those.
What do you guys see as I'm sorry, but what do you guys see as like a timeline on this, as you say, looking forward?
So the first results of this are April of this year. That sonogram image you see, being able to just present an audio file in an archive with a visual representation like that, that's April of this year, to give you an idea. transcribing that audio into English is about a quarter following that. So having the transcription come shortly on the heels. That once those two building blocks are in place, that can then be fed to our policy engine. So that's a matter of integration. None of these things are involved. We're not inventing the technology that does this. The AI tools that do these things exist today. It's just a matter of incorporating them into very large scale systems so that it happens timely and at speed.
Yeah, but to that point, there are companies that can do somewhat similar work today and have similar features. But our approach was a bit different in that we don't buy those technologies or those companies like at Global Relay. So there are many reasons, including the performance, but we build this from the ground up. So our data science team is continuing to kind of develop these solutions in conjunction with our existing customers, but do that in a unified place as opposed to just kind of patchworking technologies together to get it to function. And so that's important to us too from a security standpoint, because I'm sure many of you can imagine, right? Any new feature, how big or how small, is always a hurdle.
Yeah.
So this is really the end. I'd love to answer any questions, or if we have any comments, Dave or anyone else, certainly let us know.
Yeah, and I apologize, but at about 12:30, my computer blew up. So that's why the camera angle looks different. Yeah, I said, okay, the laptop's ready. So if anybody asked anything in that 12:30, 12:35 window, I lost it. And I apologize for that. We are looking pretty current on the questions that I see here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
One of the key takeaways I was hearing and listening to you guys, and even better for what we've had a chance to collaborate on, better understanding the platform that you have, everything that it does, and where you're taking it, is realizing how important for an organization to have control over what tools are being used. Which is a whole probably another presentation.
Oh yeah,
it is. And look, we're getting ahead of that a bit, at least from our point of view. We are, and we've already developed moving more towards the preventative and kind of a unified communications solution that encompasses, voice, and other functionality. So the control is there, and it makes it a lot easier.
And even to some degree before it gets to you guys, that your client has to understand what ghost IT might be being used. Right. And wicker all of that out, so they're really able to sit with you and leverage the solution you have.
Yeah. We talk to a lot of compliance folks in our world, and they're in a tough position. They're the ones in many cases personally responsible for responding to the regulators and personally liable in some cases, but they're often the last ones to even be consulted when a new messaging platform is being evaluated. The IT team is doing their thing, and they talk to the security guys and they talk to the business front end, and they make a selection on a platform to use, and then the compliance guy finds out about it as they're coming to his desk to install it, and he's going, "Wait a minute, how are we capturing this stuff? Who's recording this?" So that's when we get the frantic phone call from the compliance guy, like, "What do you have for this? I need to capture Slack like now." So that's generally how it goes. It's hard to avoid it sometimes.
I can see how that just like you said, so much of this is evolving in real time with different platforms and everything, and sales and marketing doesn't always speak with engineering.
Really?
Right. So the other question that I had for you guys is there a determining criteria on how you pick what will be the next platforms that you're bringing into the system?
It's not exactly a hard science, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We do get a lot of customer feedback. So our customer base is upwards of 20,000 now. So we do get a pretty good feel for what's going on in the market. When we start to see a surge in requests, we can kind of read the tea leaves pretty easily. But at the same time, we've also developed a bit of a reputation in the industry now where the firms themselves, the messaging firms and the platform firms will often reach out to us and include us when they're making moves and they're rolling out new features and capabilities. So sometimes it comes from within the industry that there's going to be a new type of communication, or there's going to be a new version of WhatsApp, for example. You know, we work directly now with Meta or Facebook or whatever they call themselves. It's a unique partnership. They've agreed to work with us. It's the first time they're doing something like this to allow a formal process to capture that WhatsApp data, both kind of the personal WhatsApp communication as well as the large scale marketing blasts that go out on WhatsApp that could potentially go out, and all of that stuff needs to be captured for certain firms. So that's another way to do it. And the final way is a little bit of kind of voodoo that our team that does the connectors themselves are pretty dialed into the marketplace. So they kind of keep their ear to the ground, and they look around constantly for, you know, what our competitors are doing, what the industry's doing, what your teenage daughter is talking on today might be the next platform that everybody's asking for tomorrow. So there's a little of that too.
Yeah, and partners too. We have some pretty good partner relationships that help us out.
Yeah, and that's interesting because my son's 14, and I was speaking with his school's principal, and she is just creating accounts everywhere, and the person to tell her who she should create, and this is just almost a manual way to understand what's being said about the school, what's out there, and things like that. And her resource is her daughter.
Yeah. It's amazing how well that could work.
Yeah. So it just kind of hits home with how you're sharing, the science that goes into it, and then the sorcery that comes in from the left side.
Yep.
Here. Oh no, just got a very nice note from Matt Stamper on the presentation.
Yeah. Very nice.
Oh, thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Hey, guys. I think overall we're probably good for now, and I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate you guys' time and attention on all of this, making yourselves available for the chapter. And I know I learned a lot, even for as familiar as I was with the platform.
Good. No, thank you. I hope
very glad to hear that.
Hope it was helpful to everyone else. So thank you, Dave, for having us.
Cool. Yeah, no, awesome. So on that note, couple more salutations.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So okay, awesome. Well then on that note, I can let you guys go. And all right. And Bo, I think you're the one to end that.
I'm gonna end it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Stay
Thanks everyone.
San Diego.
Thank you guys, and thank you everyone for attending.